Hello and welcome back. We did receive our new main bearings for the block with the thrust bearing in position 5. So we can turn our attention away from the heads and go back to the block. The goal for this video is to get the short block fully assembled. So let's get started. Okay, when reinstalling these bearings, just note that all these journals are not the same size. The first, the third, and fifth are a little bit thicker, with the fifth being the one with the thrust bearing. And each of these bearings, they have a little tang on the end here. Let's see, I don't know if you can see that. Yeah, right here. And that coincides with the little slots in here, so just make sure that they're oriented right. And so we'll start here with the thrust bearing. I find it easiest to put the little tang in there first on that side and hold it in place and just kind of push down on the other. And then make sure that they're perfectly even on both sides and you don't feel a little ridge. And then the small one here. And then a big one again on number 3. And small on number 2. And then a big one on number 1. And there we go, all down and flush. All right, now we're ready to set in our brand new crankshaft into the block. Before doing that, make sure that there's absolutely no debris or foreign material in any of these bearings. Also remember that from the old crankshaft, you're going to have to transfer over the woodruff key, which is going to go in this little slot here, and then obviously the crank pulley bolt as well. So before setting the crank in, put some oil on these bearings. Okay, there we go. You can be very liberal with this. Alrighty, now we can carefully set the crank into the block. There we go. And I'll add a little more oil to the top of these bearings here. Okay. Then make sure that it spins freely and nothing hits. Looks good. Yep, moves very freely. All right, just set the other block half aside and we can just repeat this process on the other half. Okay, and then we'll add a little bit of oil and lubricant to these bearings. Now let's move the crank over to the other side, make sure that it fits in there and rotates nice and smooth as well. And it does. Now we need to start prepping the surface here for the RTV, because we're going to put RTV on all the flat spots here where the two halves mate together. So when we added oil to this in the crank, no doubt we got a little bit of oil on some of these mating surfaces. So we'll have to clean all that up on this one. And then we'll move the crank back over here, clean it up all on this one. And then we'll go ahead and add the RTV and then start reassembling the block. Okay, and just go ahead and use lighter fluid again and just make sure that all the oil and contaminants are off these mating surfaces. Just keep going until I can hit all the surfaces here and see no more dirt on the rag. Okay, now we'll briefly turn our attention away from the main block and get these connecting rods onto the crank. That's necessary before we drop the crank into the block. Again, we're dealing with the bearings. We need to make sure that where these bearings reside, that it's perfectly clean and free of debris. Otherwise, your bearing clearances will not be correct and you'll end up with some problems. So make sure it's all clean, and then also don't mix up the caps with the rods. Each cap has to correspond to the rod that it came off of. Make sure they go back onto that rod. Just a couple quick things to note prior to installing the rods onto the crankshaft. This is a brand new crankshaft. Everything's standard size, so these journals are 52 mm. And these bearings, they do come in different sizes. Make sure that the bearings that you have are appropriate for the crank. If you get a used crank, it's always a good idea to take measurements, make sure that it is indeed 52, because these can be machined down and then you can use a larger bearing, oversized bearing, to accommodate it. So just something to make you aware of, and definitely take measurements before assembling it so you know that you have everything right. Okay, assembly of these bearings onto the rods, very similar to that of the block. Each of the bearings, they have a little tang here that's going to coincide with a little notch in the crank. And again, I think it's easiest if you just lay the bearing in on that little notch there first, and then just push down on the other side, like so. And then the same thing on the cap, and then just repeat the process for all the rods. It's hard to believe that all of this work that we're doing here boils down to the failure of one of these bearings. It's an immense amount of work for something so simple and so cheap to replace. Pretty unbelievable. All right, now we're ready to go ahead and install the connecting rod onto the crank. Again, you should have numbered these when they came off so you know which position they go into. This here is number 1, and this is the front of the crank. So 1, 2, 3, 4, like so. And as far as the orientation of this, there's a little legacy sign here that goes to the front of the motor. So I'll start by putting some oil on this, lubricating up a bit. And make sure that this is to the front, like so. And then the cap, there's only one way it can go. There's little pegs on the connecting rod and then little holes on the cap, so it can only go one way. And go ahead and apply a little bit of oil on this as well. Okay. And just kind of fit it on there very carefully. And then get these started. These are a 12 mm bolt. Okay. And then these bearing caps get torqued down to 38.4 pound-feet or 52 Newton meters. Okay. And I like to do a little bit on each one just to make sure that this cap comes down evenly, so just don't go full torque on one of them at any given time. Okay, that's pretty good. Now we'll go to the 38 pound-feet. There's that. There we go. And then once it's torqued down, make sure that this moves very freely, and it does. It'll fall to either side here from the top, and then also make sure that there's no play in it at all. That what you hear is side-to-side motion, not the vertical motion. So anyway, that feels really good. And once you think you have them all torqued down, just go back through and just double check all of them. You certainly don't want to get this wrong. And then once you have them all torqued down, just go back through and verify that all the connecting rods are on the right journals. Make sure that they all move freely, like so. Make sure there's no play in any of them. And then also make sure that they have the proper orientation. So make sure that little legacy sign is in the front on all of these. And looks like we're good. All right, in preparation of putting the case bolts back in, we want to take off the old washers, especially ones with the little rubber seal on there, and then clean these up. It's real easy to clean them up with a wire brush and a drill. And on some of these case bolts, we're going to be putting some RTV or sealant on the threads. So I like to make sure that the threads are all nice and clean as well. And also, especially on the ones with the rubber seal washers, you want to make sure that where the washer meets up with the bolt, that's all nice and clean of debris as well, since that is a sealing surface. All nice and clean now. And then just clean up the threads. Okay, and I got all the case bolts, all 18 of them laid out here. These 6 here are the ones that use the sealing washer. So I'm going to go ahead and replace those. And again, real important to have the bolts clean up where that rubber washer meets the bolt. And then just replace all those. I did get some new washers for the other bolts as well, so I'm going to just go ahead and put them on. Hope I don't feel it's real necessary. I got them, so I'm going to use them. All right, now would be a good time to put the O-rings in. We have one coolant O-ring here. And then we got 3 oil rings here. Put these in. For the RTV adhesive that I'm going to use to make these cylinder block halves together, I'm going to use the Ultra Gray. All right, once we apply the RTV, we have about 5 minutes to get everything together. So I like to get a little organized ahead of time. So as I've already done, I've cleaned up the bolts, put the new washers on and everything, and then I've kind of separated them. The right-hand bolts here, left-hand bolts here. And we're going to start by applying RTV on the right-hand side, which is this one, but the indentations for the O-rings. And we basically just need to work our way all the way around, and we pay extra attention on the ends here, because where these bolts go in are very close to the bearing, and we don't want to put a whole lot of RTV right where the bearing is, because when we put this together, we don't want any of that RTV to get squished into where the bearing is. So be very, very light coating in these 4 places right here. then we need to keep these in the upright position. So what I like to do is take a straw, split the end of the straw here, and then kind of wedge it in here, just so it keeps in the upright position while we lay the other half on top. There we are. That should hold it together while we lower the other half on. So I'm going to lower this just a bit. And then I'll lower this half on. Just make sure that got her sealed everywhere. I think we're good. All right. There we go. And we can pull these out, and we can start putting the bolts in. And again, be careful which ones you put where. The ones in the center are the ones that use the seal washer. So these are the only two seal washers on this side. Sealing washers, bolts, and then here. Okay, I'm just snugging these down at this point. Not very tight, and there's a very specific torque sequence for putting these together. So, and I know it differs from year to year too, so before you do this, make sure what's appropriate for yours. Here's the left side of the head, and we're supposed to initially torque these to 7.4 pound-feet. And it's kind of in a crisscross pattern, so you got A, B, C, D. So we'll go torque these first. And we'll flip it over and then do the same to the other side. But there's 6 bolts on this side instead of just the 4. Okay, so this one we do the 2 center ones first. 7.4. Right here. Okay, now you're going to flip it back over, and we're going to go to 13.3. That goes on the other side. And the sequencing will be exactly the same. Flip it back over, do the other side again. And now this other side will go to the 13.3. Now back to the right side part of the block. We got the 4 bolts, and this is where it's really different and tricky. They still want you going the same bolt pattern. However, the A and C bolts, which are the 2 center ones here, are an angle torque. They go to 90, whereas the The outer side ones here go to 29.5 pound-feet. So we're gonna have to kind of alternate back and forth to do that. So we'll start here and we'll just do an additional 90 degrees. So, right there, and then over here, we'll just do the 29 pound-feet, which I already have this set for. Okay, and back to 90 here. There we go. And then back to 29 here. There we go. That shows the bolt 29. All right, then we'll flip it back over and then do the other side. Okay, so back on the right-hand side, these all just go an additional 90 degrees in the same order. Okay, here, all the main bolts are in. Now we can do the smaller bolts. All right, now we can use the 12-point socket and go back to the 6. And we'll put in these top bolts. These all go to 18.4 pound-feet. And these are to be torqued in a certain order as well. And the longer one goes down here at the bottom. And then F is down here on the other side, inside the bell housing. Which is over here. Okay, this one works best with the flex head. And then don't forget the little guy. This only goes to 4.7 pound-feet, but it's on the bottom side where the oil pan is. And it goes right here. Okay, for this little guy, it's just a 10 mm. Again, flex head works best for this. Put that down there. And it's supposed to be to 4.7 pound-feet. However, I'm gonna have to change and go to an inch pound. And in inch pounds, it's 56 inch pounds. All right. All right, that's not much. Real easy to strip aluminum out, so always follow these torque specs very carefully. All right, and then just to ensure that I didn't miss anything, I like to just go back, make sure that all these bolts are definitely torqued to spec here. So with this many bolts, it's real easy to forget something or overlook something. All right, looks good. The RTB, it gets squished out to the sides. Also, it does around the rear main seal here. And of course, later we'll be putting a rear main seal in here. But some of that RTB squishes out. And so you just want to make sure that that's all wiped off so it doesn't compromise the seal later. And then the same thing goes for the other side where the oil pump is. Well, this video went a little longer than I had anticipated. I was really hoping we'd get the pistons done in this segment. So anyway, that's where we'll start off next video. Till then, see you next time.